Greetings, Rovers. If you're watching this video as it goes live, Jiyan's banner ends in 24 hours, along with his weapon. This means you're running out of time, and if you're anything like me, you're waiting until the absolute last minute to figure out if you want to pull this hunk of a man or not. Today I'm going to go all over the pros and cons of whether or not you should be pulling Gian. So let's get into it. So first and foremost, Gian probably has one of the lowest skill floors out of any character in the game. As someone like me, who is not exactly amazing at video games, Gian is definitely someone who I went for immediately. He's very easy to build, he's very easy to play. You basically just spam left click and weave in his skill whenever you have the opportunity to, and his ult is essentially the same thing. He's probably one of the easiest characters in the game to master pretty quickly, so if you're someone who struggles with these types of games and look to clear endgame content with relative ease, I definitely recommend you pull for him. Not only that is he absurdly easy to play, he's absurdly easy to parry with as well. Due to his attacks lasting a significant amount of time, it gives him plenty of opportunity to parry attacks with relative ease. Heading over to the Memphis over here, I'll show you exactly what I mean, and a couple of tips and tricks from it. So as we can see, Jiyan's attacks are very quick, they last a long time, and they sort of linger for a few seconds. Not only that, if you take advantage of his E ability, we'll wait for the mob to do an attack here. His E is basically a guaranteed parry, as you can see there. As soon as you see the circle coming and you press the E ability, you're basically guaranteed to get a parry, just due to the fact that A, it lingers for so long, and B, you're able to actually move towards the target as the mob is coming towards you, and you basically just get a guaranteed parry. It is extremely easy to do, and literally all you have to do is as soon as you see the circle, you hit E, and it's basically a guaranteed parry. So, one of the biggest things about the usability and easeability of Gian is that his ultimate ability makes mobbing and grouping of mobs absurdly easy. He's able to juggle mobs within his ult with just the regular basic attacks, which makes clearing content like the domains absurdly easy to do. I mean, look at that. You're able to juggle mobs for so long, it makes grouping up mobs and monsters in these domains and these special areas absurdly easy, and also makes them easy to do out in the world as well when you're farming your echoes. So for one of the next major talking points, the Tower of Adversity recently reset a few days ago, and nothing changed with it. So we're getting Season 2 of the Tower of Adversity with the same as it was in Season 1, which makes Gian an absolute powerhouse for the left side of the tower, as the current buff or interference within the tower is all characters' arrow damage is increased by 30%, and when casting ult, they get a stacking buff and a damage reduction. So it makes clearing the left side of the tower absurdly easy for Gian and his team. Speaking of his team, Jiyan, Mortefi, and Verena was arguably the strongest team until Yinlin came around, as the amount of damage that these three can do together is absolutely absurd, thanks to Mortefi's ultimate, Resonance Liberation, Morcado, which basically just gives a bunch of additional attacks and it goes on to Gian, and because Gian attacks so many times, he's shooting so many Mercados off-field that it is an absurd amount of damage. So, moving over towards his Resonance Chains, all of Jiyan's Resonance Chains are absolutely broken and simply get better the higher the Resonance Chain you go. You probably don't need to worry about this, as if you're watching a Polar Pass video, you're probably not going to get multiple of his Resonance Chains, but even had his R1, which, you know, is feasible for a lot of people, it gives him an additional E-cast, which again makes parrying an absolute joke, especially when you get two of them, and lowers the resolve cost, which, if you don't know what it means, is that he builds resolve as he attacks, and if you have a certain amount of resolve when you use your E ability, it just flat out does more damage. Moving on towards Jiyan's weapon, Verdant Summit. Verdant Summit is an absolute must-have for Jiyan, as the amount of damage he does with it compared to the second weapon the 5-star standard Lustrous Razor, it's absolutely night and day. One of the big things about this weapon is the crit damage. So Verdant Summit is currently the only weapon, the only broadblade weapon in the game that has flat crit damage percentage. Which crit damage, if you're in the late game, is what you're going to want over, say, attack percentage or crit percentage. One of the last talking points, and it's arguably the most weak, is that Gian has the most traversal in the game with his E. So with his E, he's actually able to stay in the air longer than most other characters if you combine them and weave them in. And while he's in his E, he is not using stamina, which allows you to glide for even longer periods of time. Again, it's very small and probably not even worth bringing up, but it's just worth mentioning. Alright, so let's get into some of the cons of Jiyan. Jiyan is probably the most power creepable standard 5-star that we've seen so far. Obviously, Yinlin is also alongside Jiyan, and now that we know more about Yinlin, I don't foresee Yinlin getting power crept as early as Jiyan does. Although, if this game is going to be anything like PGR, Punishing Grey Raven, Kuro's other game, we probably won't see Jiyan power crept for at least a minimum of a year. He just does an absolute monster amount of damage, and I just don't see them, nerfing that so quickly. So as I've mentioned earlier, Jiyan, Mortefi, and Verena was arguably the most powerful team in the game until Yinlin came along, which now with Calcharo, Yinlin, and Verena being a team, theoretically they have the most damage in the game, the most output in the game, which overshines Jiyan's team. I don't have any solid proof of this, or I haven't done any actual math, but just from feels crafting and having all of these characters at max level, the Calcharo Yinlin team feels to be doing about 15 to 20 to 25% more damage than the Jiyan team is actually capable of. Another major con of Jiyan is that he does absolutely zero resonance liberation damage. So any characters that you're going to be looking at that buff resonance liberation damage or have any sort of outro abilities, all of his damage during his resonance liberation is counted as heavy attack damage. So any buffs that do buff him, he's just not going to get the effect of, which we don't know the future state of what other characters are going to look like, but that is something that you definitely need to keep in mind and definitely has a ton of cause for concern. So one of the next problems, and this is not necessarily a problem, but for those tryhards out there, Jiyan has an absurdly low skill ceiling as well. There's really no animation canceling, there's no buffer abilities, there's really nothing you could do to get more damage or more finesse out of Jiyan outside of just what he has on his base kit. So again, if you're a hardcore character or hardcore player, and you're looking for something with, more of a flashy playstyle with canceling and dodging, Jiyan probably isn't for you. Although, again, this is necessarily a first world problem, so I don't foresee this being an issue for 99% of players, but I just thought I'd mention it. So, talking about a con of his weapon as well, considering it buffs heavy attack damage, we don't know the future state of what future Broadblade users will look like in regards to how they operate with their heavy attacks. We don't have any confirmed knowledge on what the next Broadblade user will be at this time outside of leaks, so keep that in mind when you do consider pulling for his weapon, as heavy attack damage may be something that we don't see very common in the future, considering Jiyan is already the one that we're looking at for heavy attack damage on a limited 5-star. So something else to consider as well in regards to how you potentially want to pull Jiyan. Keep in mind that the amount of limited pulls that we have gotten during the launch of Wuthering Waves, we're never going to see this amount of free pulls again in the future. It's just something to keep in mind, so if you've already invested into Jiyan, you just may want to take that into consideration when pulling future banner characters, as we will never receive the amount of compensation or thank you gifts from Kuro as we are now. So, personally, my overall rating for Jiyan is I feel he's an 8.5 out of 10. Again, just to cover some basics, is that he's absurdly easy to play. Anyone can pick him up and play him. He does a massive amounts of damage, and he's just a lot of fun to play. I like to be able to turn my brain off and not necessarily have to worry about every little aspect of the game with Gian. So, personally, I do recommend pulling Jiyan. And again, he may not be for you. You may be looking for a more sweaty character. But I feel for the general populace of this game, Jiyan will be an excellent pick and will be extremely future-proof for how you play this game. Let me know down in the comments below. I'm curious to hear your guys' thoughts on this. And as always, please like, comment, and subscribe. I would sincerely appreciate it. And as always, guys, I stream every day over on Twitch at twitch.tv/LOLshinya. I hope to see you guys there.